Older Redditors, what is the biggest change in our society no one mentions? Single income families. For those in the generation before mine, it was normal for a man's income to cover all of the costs of living for a family. For those in the generation after mine, it takes 2 incomes. And any good job used to come with fully paid medical insurance for the employee and his family. No copays. No premiums for the employee. Nowadays employers pass part of these costs on to the employee. I used to always be planning my social calendar several days ahead. If I was meeting a friend or girlfriend, it always had to be at an appointed landmark, so you wouldn't miss each other. Everything now seems spur of the moment. It's a lot more flaky, with people deciding in the moment what's their best option for a good time. I'm young and not a fan of this. My parents are big on having plans laid before an event takes place, and the number of times I've had to ask them for lifts to the nearest city, which is half an hour away, is annoyingly high. It's got to the point where I'm telling my friends that if they can't tell me a few days beforehand, I won't be there. Same. I get legitimately annoyed when I get asked to do something spur of the moment. My brain isn't wired that way. I like to know what is coming. And I like keeping to what I thought I was going to do that day. If my plans get disrupted, I get irrationally frustrated, even if my old plans were less appealing than the new option. It just takes time for my brain to rearrange everything and for me to chill out. Not me, but my great-grandfather, who I had the pleasure of knowing until I was 18, had some insight when I asked what invention had the most impact on him. He was nearly 90 years old at the time, and his response still intrigues me to this day. He said that screens in his windows to protect him from the bugs at night changed his life more than anything else. He grew up on a farm in the thumb of Michigan, and getting eaten alive by mosquitoes at night was awful. I asked him why his response wasn't the use of the telephone, TV, or even the radio. His response was all of those things involve other people. Screens directly affected whether or not I could sleep. I don't know why, but screens were something that I had never appreciated once in my life. Repair shops. There used to be TV repair shops, vacuum cleaner repair shops, shoe repair shops. Things would break and then you would take them to a shop, or even go and buy a part and fix them. Now everyone just buys a new whatever. Hell, I'd tack on appliances and products that could actually be repaired. Products today aren't engineered to be fixable. They are meant to have a short shelf life so that they break or become obsolete when a new model is released. Planned obsolescence. Everything is disposable today. And on the increasingly rare occasions that something can be fixed, the parts are so difficult or expensive to get that it's cheaper to buy a new one. I remember all the little repair shops my town had that are long gone. And I think about all this stuff going into landfills. It's frustrating. The idea of a telephone number being tied to a place, rather than a person. It used to be, call the office, leave a message on the machine, or call the break room. Someone will answer. Now it's mostly just call or text me and I'll get the message wherever I am. You never see old white dog poop around anymore. There is actually a scientific reason for this. Dog food companies used to use large amounts of bone meal to bulk up the content of their products. Once Doggo had done his business, the poo goo would gradually dry and the crystalline calcium compounds from the bone meal would be left on the surface. The USDA changed their regulations, forcing manufacturers to use less bone meal and more, actual food. So you rarely see zero-bar style dog turds nowadays. Nobody I know ever mentions getting lost anymore. Even idiots that used to get lost every day. Having GPS on everyone's phone has made asking for directions a thing of the past in 99% of situations. As a member of public safety in a rural area, GPS has made it worse. One electronic device fails and people think they are part of the Donner Party. They have to be told by dispatch things like, "Can you go back the way you came?" It's horrifying. I have recently rescued a woman cornered by a snake in the center of a 4-acre gravel parking lot. I showed up, rolled down my window and told her to walk around it. She had never considered this. It has to be said though, I have a skewed sense as I only deal with the idiots. The normal intelligent people figure it out without calling 911. I don't think I'm much older than the average Redditor at 24. But the one thing I'm kind of appalled by is the lack of interest in security by people of all ages. That whole thing with the NSA happened and people barely batted an eyelash. This whole cultural thing of if you don't have anything to hide, it shouldn't matter who looks needs to stop. Edit. Also, this whole outrage culture that seems to continue to build up steam everywhere you look. Even on Reddit. People will take a personal opinion as an attack on their person just because they don't agree with it. If you don't agree with an opinion, it's just an opinion. And if someone is factually incorrect, don't hurl insults at them. Explain to them with proof why they're wrong. The amount of animals we see in our neighborhoods. When I was a kid, we would go out in our suburban backyards and catch lizards, turtles, garter snakes. I lived in a large urban center, so it was not like there were farms all around me. And yet the diversity of wildlife was huge. My kids were lucky to see squirrels. Stuff is not all brown anymore. Holy FCK. Back in the 1970s everything was earth tones. Brown, yellow, orange. Cars. Wood paneling in homes, oh god. The wood paneling. The shag carpets. Clothes. It was all f-king brown. Go watch movies or TV shows from the 70s and notice it all. I'm so happy to be living in the colorful world of today. Yes. It started getting colorful in the 80s. It's still a change from a point in the past. Close bracket. Career and job stability. The average person now works 12 to 15 jobs in their lifetime. It used to be nothing like that. Most companies got rid of pension plans and loyalty programs, leaving little reason for people to stay. It sucks, but what choice do we have? Not to mention that 95% of the time, jumping ship to different jobs every few years is a much better bet to increase salary compared to staying with the same company. Fat people are everywhere now. When I graduated high school in 1994, I was normal sized. Not skinny. Not fat. I was the same size as pretty much everyone else who graduated in my class. I've stayed the same size since high school, except for a few months before and after giving birth, and now I'm considered skinny and have even been called anorexic. Double quote. It's so f-king sad. Yes. The rise of the scooter riding class. It's freaky how in less than a decade you went from seeing regular sized people to not just fat, but way more fat people. Everywhere simultaneously. And their kids. Too. When I was young, there was only the fat kid in a classroom. Now, it's the fat kids. And they're fucking land whales. It probably seems pretty obvious on the surface, but attire has drastically changed. Hear me out, though. I think that the way society views fashion, clothing, and attire in a general attitude is completely alien to the world I grew up in. For starters, there seems to be a bigger focus on aesthetics before utility. I cannot count the number of times I've seen people roaming around in tight skinny jeans that have pockets smaller than a Roman dagger. It's insane. Another strong trend really stands out in what you guys wear on top. Shirts are way tighter on guys than they were years ago. No one mentions the fact that it's impossible to go out and buy a loose shirt unless you want to look like you've donned an undersized snuggie. Back in my day, everyone wore good old-fashioned togas, which could carry scrolls, documents, edicts, and the like beneath their flowy white robes. Unfortunately, they could also carry knives, which were used to stab Mexii times at the base of the Curia of Pompey. When I was growing up in the 60s, I saw my friends at school, then went home and played with neighborhood kids or spent time with my family. We only had one phone and I wasn't allowed to use it to chat with my friends. Compared to today, the downtime allowed for time to decompress. Smell. Everything used to stink of tobacco smoke. Offices, homes, stores, and if you didn't like it you were fussy or pathetic or weak. Nowadays everything stinks of fake perfume like Febreze. It's not any better. But at least, as far as we know, Febreze doesn't cause cancer. Eater, thank you for the gold. Kind stranger. Nobody buys ringtones. Either they use the default or they have a song. And most people I know keep their phones on silent 24/7 anyways. The important people have custom vibrate patterns. I have a great disdain for ringtone noises. If it's not an alarm, a YouTube video, or porn, volume is never enabled on any of my devices. Silent and do not disturb are my favorite thing since sliced bread. People used to make plans and stick to them. Now we say we'll meet for drinks at 6. But then text at 4:30 saying we might be late and maybe we should do it tomorrow. Or I could do it at 6:30 so we move it to 6:30 and then when you're on the train on the way there you text me and say you forgot you had to pick up your dry cleaning and it's going to be more like 6:45. Yada yada yada. I dropped my iPhone in a toilet 2 weeks ago so I went a week without a phone and now I'm using a piece of old shitty BlackBerry that's impossible to text on. So I make plans and stick with them. The other day I told my soul let's meet for drinks at 6. Something happened. He was a little late. I ended up doing the crossword puzzle at the bar having a beer and we met at like 6:30. The world did not end. Phone booths. Those things used to have queues outside of them on a Saturday night when people were desperately making last minute meetup changes. Now they lay abandoned and vandalized. A relic to a forgotten pre-mobile past. Here in the UK very few have been dismantled and are just standing there with the windows smashed in and the receiver swinging gently in the breeze from a tired and weathered cord. My 7-year-old had no clue what it was when walking past one and looked completely baffled by the idea of having to make a call while connected to a wire. Late to the party. However, in the age of couchsurfing, Airbnb and car sharing sites, I sit here and remember that I had been taught not to talk to strangers, not to let them into my home and certainly not to get in their cars. Strictly speaking, I should not even be answering ARP's question. The Airbnb and couchsurfing thing is definitely crazy when you take a step back. But it's also a testament to how generally good the vast majority of people are. My daughter is in 7th grade. About 99% of the times she's with friends, there will be some sort of discussion about who is gay and who is this and that. Always. When I was that age, it wasn't even a thing. Now it's the thing. At my middle school, the teacher's lounge was not any different. Half a dozen of the teachers were eating lunch, gossiping about whether or not the freshman bio teacher was in the closet. I started to understand why once I had him, floppy wrists, unicorn anatomy Fridays, etc. But the adult gossip still surprised me. Cars don't break down often anymore. It used to happen every few thousand miles. I've noticed reading some books from before I was born that the author will use the term breakdown lane instead of shoulder. I guess that's what they called it then when cars broke down all the time, but I've never heard anyone call it that. Maybe just a regional thing though. In USA, much less litter. You can't imagine the 1960s. Eat a Big Mac. Drop the styrofoam on the ground. Also, as bad as the current situation is with climate change, you can't imagine, unless you live in maybe Shanghai, what air quality was like in parts of LA County in the 1960s up to the 1980s and maybe later. Just terrible and dangerous many days. Edit. 1 point. We experienced a situation so bad that they had to start doing something about it. That means we pretty much experienced the worst before it got better. 1975 was I think just when new cars started to have catalytic converters, but so many old cars remained on the road, still using leaded gasoline, into the mid 1990s or later. Population increase and the homogenization of place. 30 years ago the cities in my metro area were distinct entities, with undeveloped rural land separating them. Now it's just one big mass of strip malls and suburbia. 10 years ago I-5 between Olympia and Everett ran through distinct and separate cities, separated by undeveloped rural areas. Now it's nothing but a solid 150 miles of strip malls and suburbia. Every place is like every other place. Every freeway off-ramp in the country has the same half dozen fast food restaurants and the same half dozen retailers. Independent hamburger stands and family restaurants are almost extinct. And independent retailers are going extinct. Black people can live in my hometown and no one loses their mind. Racism hasn't gone away. But the older people that were hardcore idiots in this regard have died or moved. Their kids and younger people in general don't care. They've gone to school or work with people of other ethnicities and have probably pursued at least one romantic relationship with someone that would have been taboo in the past. It used to be that realtors wouldn't show houses or apartments to black people. But now you can see all the housing stock online, and the state EOC is also aggressive about enforcing housing complaints. An overwhelming obsession with the self. For the first time in society, narcissism is becoming not only accepted, but widely encouraged. We have countless apps and profiles where the focus is to curate and project the best version of oneself. This type of behavior is rewarded by fame and recognition. People who do a good job of promoting themselves are rewarded with followers and likes and all other kinds of bullshit that further inflates this weird sense of worth. We have these celebrities and pop icons who come off as straight up assholes. But for some reason we eat up what they have to say. I mean, look at the US president. I feel like I'm noticing it in my day-to-day life more all the time. It seems harder to get into good conversations about ideas and concepts. Because everyone is so used to thinking and talking about themselves. We're moving closer to the point of everyone being in their own little world, where genuine connection is scarce. I also mean this mostly for people like 27 or less. The ones who went through formative years introduced to social media. The lack of middle ground. In almost everything. Everyone talks about how polarizing everything is now. But no one talks about the core root of the issue. 20 years ago everyone got their news from the same 4 sources and then digested it as a community. Together. You've always had your fringe players. But everyone accepted a lot of compromise back in the day. Because we didn't have alternatives. You had to mingle with those you disagreed with. Now, anyone can find a specialized interest group, news source, or circle of virtual friends that will agree with every insane thing you have to say. So while it's good to be connected and find friends, it is isolating all of us. Smoking in bars. Just going out for the night meant your clothes were going to smell. And at the time, I was into it. But looking back, going to punk shows in those conditions was pretty terrible. Getting all hot and sweaty in hazy smoke-filled locales with poor ventilation. F-king sucked. If the bar was small enough and the band was popular enough, the place would be packed from front to back, making the temperature super hot. And you'd be unable to breathe really. You'd have to keep leaving the bar just to get fresh air, or risk passing out. Fixing things around the house. Friends of mine are always amazed when I fix something around the house on my own without either calling a repairman or just throwing it out and buying a new one. Come to think of it, the whole idea of a repairman seems to have gone away. Fixing stuff rather than buying a new thing is so mind-blowing to some people. My iPhone charge port broke a while back. So I bought a new one and used a YouTube tutorial to learn how to install it. Took me an hour and cost $14. My friends were blown away that I didn't pay the Apple Store $150 to fix it or just buy a new phone. It's crazy to me how we live in a time where all information you need to fix things is so readily available and people are so willing to ignore it. Medical science advances make people live longer. But the quality of life at the end is often a nightmarish, dragged out experience that goes on for years and years. In movies it's always a sudden death or one where it happens in a relatively short period of time and family gets to hear their last words in the hospital before they peacefully close their eyes. Real life is the person's mind and body slowly falling apart and degrading over like a decade until it collapses. In my opinion, euthanasia should be legal. If I don't want to go through that, I should have the choice not to. We give dogs a better ending to their lives than we give ourselves.